Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Bottom Line. I'm your host, Lauren Kalil. Our show is brought to you by Whoop. Start tracking your strain, recovery, and sleep scores today. To get your hands on a free strap and an extra month's membership, make sure to click the link in our description. On today's episode, we're discussing the recent news of certain competitions not being able to pay its athletes. And here to discuss the topic is Justin LoFranco and Emily Beers. Emily recently wrote a story, two stories on the situation that's happening. Emily, you've done a lot of research. You've spoken to athletes as well as competition directors. Let's start with CanWest. The competition happened in July. They promised to pay out athletes over $105,000 from first to 10th place for the elites and first through third for teams. Now, originally, the athletes were told that they would be paid within 4 to 6 weeks after the competition. Then it was pushed to the week of August 15th. And then they said, no, we're going to do it in percentages by September 30th. But now there's still a big question mark. What exactly is happening with these delays with CanWest?
I mean, the long and the short of it is they just didn't make money enough to pay the athletes. And they had what I would think is a pretty aggressive prize purse planned. And then I believe they don't have the money. I believe that is true. And so I guess, what do you do? So they're still saying they're going to pay, or they have every intention to. And I know I don't know if that's been confirmed, but they ran a Can East competition, I think a couple weeks ago. And so the assumption would be they were going to be paying Can East money to Can West athletes. So kind of like paying your last year's income tax with this year's money. So not the best situation overall.
But have they ultimately said to the athletes that they are eventually going to be able to pay them?
He's still promising, or I think he used the word intention. The organizer, Mike McLean, that his every intention to still pay out the athletes. So that is allegedly the plan. But it's hard to imagine there's going to be money coming in from, I'm not sure where, in the next little bit.
Okay, so a similar situation is happening with the European Championship. They're also currently not able to pay their athletes. They promised more than $45,000 in prize money. What exactly is going on with this situation? Is it the same thing or different?
It was 40,000 pounds, but yeah, the language there just seems a little less certain than CanWest. Their sort of hope is that if they find more investors or vendors or sponsors, or if they sell the company, I'm not sure who would want to buy it or invest in it, then they may be able to pay a percentage of athletes. And the organizer there has promised like monthly updates. But I would say read between the lines, the language there seems more dire and less likely that the athletes will get paid even a percentage of their prize winnings.
Justin, when we look at the history of off-season competitions, is this a common struggle that events face, is not being able to pay out the prize purses?
It's something we've definitely seen before. It's a common struggle that is shared amongst what I would call a universal struggle of all organizers is finances and making these profitable events that are able to stand on 2 feet and then also return profit. It's extremely challenging to do that. We've heard that time and time again from everybody that runs a competition. Now, the failure to pay out is less common, but it has happened before. And people have been stuck in various situations where at the end of the day, after they pay their vendors, they buy all the materials and supplies, and they either sell less tickets or whatever arrangement they have at the venue, or however the additional revenues that are supposed to come in don't come in, or they have sponsors that cancel. It can completely change the game. And so they are unequivocally on razor-thin margins. That is a fairly common place to be in for even large-scale competitions. I want to make sure to underscore the fact that it's competitions across the board that are struggling to actually put together financially viable competitions on a regular basis. So whatever their cadence is for launching different events, et cetera, all that aside, it is very tough and the margins are very thin. So that is something that's universal. With that being said, though, actually moving payouts into the multiple months delay or potentially not, as it sounds closer to what the European Championship situation is a bit of a less common situation. We don't often write these stories, but we have written them in the past, it's a very unfortunate situation.
Emily, when speaking with the athletes and the event organizers, what is the mood between the two different parties with what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a few athletes from CanWest, and none of them particularly wanted to go on the record. There was three of them that did. But generally, everyone's just quite upset about it, obviously, because, you fly across the country or from the US to Canada and they're paying out to 10. The assumption is if you're a pretty decent athlete, you probably know you're going to at least win some prize money and cover your trip. So I think for a lot of them, they thought at least their trip would be covered. And then if they do better than that, then they have, a bit of a surplus. So, yeah, I mean, I obviously you don't blame them. They're really upset. And I mean, the organizers, I feel for them too. But on the other hand, it still seems like it's their responsibility. And if they've bitten off more than they can chew, then that's sort of up to them to cough it out, would be my opinion.
And I think the interesting thing is this kind of raises a bigger question, because as soon as we posted something to Instagram, we're actually hearing from CrossFit Games athletes who are also saying that they have yet to be paid from the semifinals. We had Danielle Brandon who commented, and she said that she hasn't even been paid from MAC yet, or the games. Obviously, we understand that with the games, it might be more of a delay because of drug testing. But also, I think Jason Smith from South Africa said that he has yet to be paid. What bigger picture are we looking at, Justin, when we see that this is also happening with in-season CrossFit competitions?
Yeah, we saw this. We saw this kind of what we call like an inconsistent application of payouts across the board during the sanctional season. We talked. We produced a story back in 2020 where we talked to a number of athletes, big name athletes that were on the record talking about this and just kind of laying out the inconsistencies. And I think what's really important to understand here is that in this instance, it's less. The organizers are not, as I understand it in the conversation we've had very recently, are that the organizers are not the ones that are doing the payouts any longer. This is actually coming from CrossFit. Now there have been, and there are many different reasons for delays. Number one is collecting what we call all the basic information from an athlete from a paperwork standpoint and a wire transfer standpoint. And I'll just hand them a lot of cash at the end of the competition. They have some reporting requirements that they have to do, and they need to wire transfer information. And then the second big reason is drug testing. So if you're from one of the qualifying competitions where you send 5 athletes and 5 athletes get paid out, all 5 of those athletes will get tested. They'll go to the CrossFit Games. So there have been traditionally delays to paying out the CrossFit Games, regionals previously, semifinals now, as a result of drug testing. And so my understanding that it has traditionally been the case is that they pay out after the games because there may be additional testing at the games, and then they just kind of cut eventually a final check over to people to zero out the balance. But we are sort of now, obviously, we've had a lot of different payouts that have already got, some payouts have already gone out for semifinals and some have not. So now we're in this area which is pretty inconsistent. So I talked to one athlete that competed at Granite Games who said, hey, I have been paid out for Granite Games, but I have not been paid out for the games yet. So obviously they're doing this in 2 separate times. So it raises the question of why are there delays and why isn't there a consistency across the board? And athletes do, I think it's also important to understand this, that the $15,000 that was at CanWest Games and the $5,000 that was at the Granite Games, for example, as if you were the winner, that's a lot of money. There are not a lot of earning potentials when it comes to prize purses, and we track closely the prize purse earning potential or prize purse earnings for the whole year. And that's a lot of money to be out. And also, it just raises larger questions of why is there an inconsistency from one competition to another competition when CrossFit's ultimately the final payout entity here. And so it's kind of an unfortunate circumstance. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of really clear answers, except the fact that games, as far as I know, I talked to 2 athletes that are expecting payouts from the games, and neither of them have been paid out. Granite Games, I know, I spoke to one athlete who's been paid off from the Granite Games, and we've obviously heard from Danielle Brandon, who commented publicly about the MAC, and then obviously, and then finished Cape Town. And so it's not really sure. It doesn't make a lot of sense why there's an inconsistency across the board, especially so late after semifinals already wrapped up and concluded.
So when looking at the rule book, I don't think that there's anything in there that specifically says there's a timeline. So what are athletes supposed to expect when it comes to getting their money? It's just up to each individual semifinal, even though CrossFit's the one paying?
It's not really, and this, you're asking a great question. And unfortunately, I don't think neither Emily nor I or anybody else on our staff has a good answer for that, because it's just ultimately up to CrossFit. I think CrossFit's the one that cuts the checks. And, if there's an issue or a reason for delay, it's just not really communicated. But they haven't made a promise that they'll pay it at any time. I think there's a past precedent where they usually zero it out by the end of the year. But it's anecdotal at best, and it's on an ad hoc basis because one athlete may experience a longer delay than another athlete. We just don't really, frankly, know the answer to that question. But it's a great question. It's a valid question, and wish there was more consistency, but there's been no communication on that front. In fact, most of this information has come from us. Just asking questions of athletes and organizers as to why there's delays and whether people have been paid yet.
So I think when we go back to specifically these two instances with CanWest and the European Championship, should the off-season competitions be relying on ticket sales, a hypothetical number, when it comes to developing a prize purse?
No, I personally do not. I'll let Emily. Sorry, I'm speaking a lot here, but I think Rogue is a great example where they've set a baseline payout and they say, hey, you know what, this is what we're going to pay out for our competition, and that fits in line with whatever metrics you're using to determine what your available budget is. And then they tied the additional increases in payouts to ticket sales. So last year, as ticket sales increased, the prize purse ultimately increased, which I think is a brilliant idea, because the people that fill seats are not the organizer. They're not like, oh, sweet, you know what, like, Justin LoFranco is organizing this event, so I'm definitely going to watch because he does a bang-up job. Like, no, I want to see Brent Fikowski and Belver throw down, and those two guys are filling seats. They're putting butts in seats. And so I think that tying ticket sales to pay back the athletes is a smart strategy, because they are in direct relationship. In my opinion, the better the athletes that you have on the field to play, the more seats you're going to, the more tickets you're going to sell, and therefore that money should in part go back to the athletes who are filling those. I think that's a way of contributing to them. Name, image, and likeness is a conversation, a topic that we've talked about a little bit, and saying, well, they're not showing up. They're not buying a CrossFit Games jersey because it says CrossFit Games jersey on it. They're buying a CrossFit Games jersey on it because Brent Fikowski's name's on it, and they want to support the heck out of that guy. So I think, yeah, you pay him a couple of bucks. That makes a lot of sense, because you wouldn't have sold the jersey by itself, or you'd sold less of them. Because you're selling it directly to a fan of that person, and that's the same person that buys the ticket. So I think coupling those sales between that and additional prize purse increases is a smart strategy, and I like the fact that Rogue does that. And so I think that's a nice model. The baseline fits in your budget, and then after that, if people sell more tickets, and hey, that's great. Use that to sweeten the pot. Emily,
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up too, because both the European Championship owner, and then when I was talking to Alexei Leblanc-Bazinet, who's the organizer of the Atlas Games when I was in Montreal, he said that their ticket sales were way less than they were expecting, and that was like a big reason. And they also said that European Championships is that ticket sales were really low, and that affected the ability. So obviously they are relying on ticket sales. And I also think, though, if fans knew that prize purses can be increased based on, ticket sales, and they are supporting the athletes, it might entice people to come out, because it does sound like attendance is just down across the board. And I don't know if that's just still a lag from COVID or what, but, back in the day, I know, California regional competitions had tons of people. So does question why,
that place is packed.
Yeah. So why are people not going to these live events so much anymore? And that is an issue.
So then what are some of the solutions? Should CrossFit be helping with attendance to these things in the way of promotion because they're off-season competitions? Or like, what are ways that competitions can rely on being able to pay out the athletes?
Well, that's certainly a kind of a topic for another day to dive deep into. But I would say on its most basic level, sports is entertainment. If you find ways of entertaining the people in the stands, that's going to be a good way of getting them there. There are several different buckets of fans that are out there. There's the athlete supporter fan, the gym supporter fan, So athlete supporter fan is your family and friends, individuals that know that athlete specifically, that want to go watch them and support them. You have people that don't necessarily know the athlete very well, but they're from their gym, and they're as a gym, they're local enough to the competition to drive an hour or a couple of hours to go support. And then everybody else needs to be filled with people that are looking for entertainment. They're fans of those athletes specifically. They don't know them, but they just want to see them compete, or they're fans of the sport and they want to see live competition go in. And it's the latter bucket that's the most challenging one to fulfill, because you're always going to find local community members that are going to want to go and support their friend that's competing, or their gym member that's competing. And that's great. But that doesn't balloon your ticket sales or your vendor sales exponentially. Excuse me. That's going to get you into buckets 3 and 4, which is, we've got a roster of athletes that have a fan base that people want to go watch them compete live, or we have a fan base of individuals that are big fans of the sport of CrossFit and they want to go live. So, for instance, I might go to a basketball game even though I don't care about either one of those teams because I freaking love basketball. Well, that's the bucket that's going to be the hardest to fill, because I know going to a basketball game, I'm going to get a bunch of dunks, probably a decent game, because these two teams hate each other. So I know they're going to be throwing down and they're going to want to win, and it's going to be a good game. It's going to be good competition. Like, I'll go watch that because I love basketball. Okay, well, that's bucket number 4 for somebody that wants to go to a CrossFit competition because they love CrossFit. And what are competitions doing to cater towards making that more entertaining? That's a very different scenario, and obviously a long conversation, which, they have to do a better job of doing that. I don't have an answer for that one, but
another topic for another day.
Another topic for another day.
Emily, what's your bottom line?
While I do feel for the organizers and how challenging it is to run a financially profitable event, I can't side with them on this one. It's totally unacceptable. Like, the athletes need to be paid. It's a debt you owe them, and when you owe money, you have to find a way to pay it. So I don't know if that means going into personal debt. This is the commitment that you made, so pay up.
Justin, what's your bottom line? Yeah, unfortunately, the athletes, as my understanding, are about the last to get paid in this arrangement, because they're it's the end of competition by the time you've spent most of the money for organizing this event, et cetera. And so, the debt obligation that you owe them is sort of coming at the end after everything's getting tallied up and all the vendors are paid and all the signs are printed, et cetera, and stuff. So, but the athletes do have to get paid at the end of the day. And there should be an expectation of receiving compensation, because you have held up your end of the bargain. You showed up, you competed, you won, you placed. There should be. And I really do wish that CrossFit would hold events more accountable, especially those that are licensed events that are lending their name and their credibility to that. CrossFit has been reticent to do any sort of policing work like that, though, in the past. But my bottom line is, athletes got to get paid. I know not firsthand, but from firsthand accounts, how financially challenging it is to run a competition. But you're not forced to do that. This is ultimately your call, your choice to do that. But the athletes have to get paid. And there, frankly, should just be an honest discussion that's out there about what is a reasonable expectation for that. It should be in the rule book that athletes would get paid in 6 months. It should be outlined in specific. And I think that if CrossFit set a standard similar to how competitions want to run their competitions like the games, it establishes, number 1, a baseline for discussion. Number 2, an example to follow. And I think that's an easy thing for them to lead by example for, because they obviously have a lot more money than other competitions to be able to hold themselves accountable and set a standard going forward.
Justin, Emily, thanks for sitting down. I think that this story is going to have more legs as we learn more. So everybody, make sure you keep going to morningchalkup.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll see you guys next time.